So I think this is actually one of the biggest IT challenges we have so far had in the arena. We have a robot with us. We have 4 different mics at the same time, and then we have 2 different slides. So let's see how this is going to work. Unfortunately, there was no fireplace installed in the arena, so we're going to hack a little bit the conversation around a Friday afternoon. But first of all, thank you for joining. I'll just do a very quick presentation of who we have here today. And hopefully for the next half an hour or so, we're going to have a really nice and constructive discussion to unfold both the meanings, but also the complexities around working with universal design. So we have tried today to invite a number of different profiles that none of them are fully holistically expert in everything in the field of universal design, but they all have different perspectives to bring on board. So I would love all of you to welcome the panelists today. Down here we have Henrik Ib, and he is the CEO of the Muscular Dystrophy Foundation Denmark. So Muskelsvindsfonden in Danish. Yeah, please give him a big hand. Next up, we have from Rambøll, Denmark, we have Jakob Deichmann, and he's a chief consultant and an architect and a traffic planner, so working a lot around the urban environment and looking at how to create universal and inclusive solutions there. Please give him a big hand. Then you all know, but we have as well Oni Eickhout, our keynote, that will also be part of the discussion today, and it's really nice for you also to be part. Please give her a big hand as well again. And then live streaming in from Berlin, we have it's not only a robot, but it's also Michael Hartmann, who is a UX designer at Microsoft Inclusive Design. So he's able to turn around both to look at you, but also the panel up here. And it's really nice that we're also able to at least leave no one behind in terms of the panel that were represented today and their ability to be here physically. So please give a big hand also to Michael. Yeah, next up we have my colleague, Diana Lundgren. She's a startup coach and innovation officer here at DTU Skylab. She's also now leading one of our accelerators, so being deep into the profiles of the startups that we have here at Skylab. Please give her a big hand. And last up here, we have Frederik Neble. You are the CEO and founder of Ubitel, one of the startups that's actually started while you were studying here at DTU, but now you're doing that full time. So maybe not advocating so much on fulfilling your master's education here, but more running with the passion and the dream around the technologies that you're developing. So please give a big hand also to Frederik. So just briefly about the setup, we have all of you present today, and as I said, we'll really encourage you to ask all the questions on Slido. It's really great to see that they're popping up here, so you can both vote on the questions to make sure that we ask the relevant ones, but you can also feed in other questions. We also have a number of people that are live streaming in, both from one of the big entrepreneurship courses that we host here at the DTU, but also other people that are interested. So they are also live and know that they can post the questions here in the chat. But let's get started. To actually give you a little bit of an opportunity to introduce yourself, I want you already to maybe spend a few minutes sharing about the perspectives and the opportunities that you see within being universal and inclusive around solutions. So maybe you have a good example from your field. Oni, you have shared a lot already, but within your area, what is a good example of a solution that tried to be inclusive and universal in the approach? We'll start down here with Henrik.
Thanks for inviting me. The Muscular Dystrophy Foundation of Denmark is actually a little bit special because we are a disability organization made by people who are living with a disability and their relatives. But we are also a very big concert organizer in Denmark. We organized the Green Concerts, if you know, then it's a very popular Danish events. Unfortunately not taking place this year, but it has another reasons because of the COVID-19. But we have done that for about 40 years, and we have a holiday conference and sports center called Musholm at Zealand, Denmark, which is awarded as one of the most accessible centers in the world, and especially by our organization called for universal design. So it's I have a lot of experience because I was a project leader with that center, building that center, with the theories and the thoughts about behind the universal design principles, and I would like to share with them some of my experience if I can.
So you're definitely emphasizing also of working universal around the built environment. So how to create actually a hotel and a retreat that is accessible.
Both the built, but also daily life, because I've worked a lot with accessibility to concerts and festivals and in an open space, because green concerts is special because it's moving from day to day. So you need to move the accessibility from day to day, which is actually a little bit difficult sometimes. You can't not just move an elevator if you want to. So
thank you very much, Henrik. Yeah, Jakob.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been working 20 years with accessibility and universal design within urban spaces, pavements, bus terminals, stuff like that. So it's the built environment, but outdoors. And I think what is inspiring about the concept of universal design, as the United Nations define it, is that you should strive to make the general solution the accessible solution. And then I think you described very well that we are all disabled at some time in our life. When we are babies, we are in a pram. When we get old, we have problems. Some people are disabled their whole life, others for a few years or a few months if they've broken their leg or something. And traditionally, I think we designed streets for 80% of the people, and the 20% were left out or had trouble. So I think my work is about raising that barrier. We cannot get to 100%, but perhaps to 95%. And then for the last 5%, I think this is where the technological solutions are relevant, because I think in streets, also in houses, what you should aim at is actually as low tech as possible. And I think I'm maybe the odd one out here, because that's of course not what you want to hear. But make it simple. Think about is it easy to use? Some years ago I sometimes talk to people from the Blind People's Association, and I know they are sort of split in two religions. One part is fascinated by technology and all these things that they can do, and the other part is actually a bit scared about it. They call it the gadget hill. You have to have things, machines to help you do everything, and they are concerned, well, what about if the battery runs out, and what if I can't handle it? And so I think technology is great, but there's always a fine line between doing too much and always remember the users and what they can do, what you can do, and how you can use this thing you have developing is not the same as the user can do.
Thank you very much, Jakob. Only you already had a big opportunity to explain a lot of the cases, but actually we have an interesting question up here that I know is also reflecting some of the project groups that are here today. So we look a lot into end user solutions, where you have a startup, you have a company that's developing a solution that's directed towards an end user. A lot of the startups that we also have are B2B, so they are not directly selling to the end user. How can this perspective be an opportunity for them? Or is it at all relevant if you're a B2B to look into universal design? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You have a mic there? No. Okay, sorry. I don't think so. Well, it's a good question. But when we talk about user-centered, people-centered lead users, it doesn't necessarily mean the end user. It can be all stakeholders in whatever process. It's the approach, and it's useful whenever there are people involved, actually. And I think you can choose the tools and methods. And I think there are many examples of B2B that benefited hugely from people-centered design research. And you know, business to business are also about people. So there's no distinguishing here. It's different tools, maybe different ways of working, but there's no real difference.
Thank you very much. And I guess often if you still have a B2B product, there is still, in the end of the line, there is someone that's going to use it and that's going to benefit from the services or the solution. So even though you're not directly selling to them, you need to be observant of the ones that it's actually going to benefit in the end, and not forget them in the process, even though the customer is someone else than the actual end user.
Yeah, well, there are many examples of, it's just about human behavior, human understanding. It's about finding effective ways of doing things. It's how you can be relevant. And sometimes there is no end customer at all. It's about processes and how people work and behave, and that's what you want to discover and to develop a robust and solid and effective and efficient solution.
Thank you very much, Oni. So Michael, you are next in line. You're situated here in the middle of the panel on the high table. So I hope you can hear us, and let's see if we can hear you from in there.
Can you please rephrase the question, because it was very hard to hear at the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. So the first question is more if you could share from your area of work any glimpse on what are the opportunities to work with universal design, and maybe if you have some concrete examples. I know that you work a lot with interface and UX design, so maybe unfolding a little bit some of the examples of good opportunities that has been benefiting from having a universal perspective in their solutions.
Okay, so most of the work we do is with people that are doing like line of business work, like within companies. And what we have seen is that there is, especially because of a lot of new devices being brought into the workforce, every person nowadays has to have some kind of device with them, like service technicians have devices with them. There is a lot that is not done very well. So the one example that I often share is that you have a service technician who works with oily gloves to do some hydraulic repair. And they cannot use computers because you don't want them to use the oily gloves on a keyboard or on a touch screen. So there is a lot of opportunities to make the usage of devices a lot better for people that in the past haven't had to use digital devices and now have to have them because some like company decision says, well, we want to have everything digitized, but in the end, where the employees have to use them, it's a lot of things that are very badly done. And one of the opportunities I do see is especially in the area of conversational AI, where you can have voice and like voice bots where employees can interact with them a lot better. And there is a lot of industries where you need very specific interactions and especially a lot of guidance of employees, where there is the generic approach that you have with like Siri or Cortana or like Google now is not very helpful. So this would be one area where I would hope to see a lot more being done, where employees or people that now have devices to use which previously didn't have to are served a lot better with a lot better technology.
So I guess that comes down to the fact of making things simple. So we're living in more and more a high-tech environment, fast-pacing technologies, but also not forgetting the people that actually has to benefit and use it in the end, or the new segments of society, such as the elders, or, well, our generation that's also being left behind sometimes in some of the new solutions coming up.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. All right, Deanna, yeah.
Right, thank you. So from the work that we're doing here in Skylab, and the chair that I'm sitting on is the coaching approach to startups. So we are coaching and we are facilitating the startup and business development of startups. So our role is to provide feedback, to share insights, and network to where to go to get the feedback and the insights that you need in order to develop the product and solution to give technology purpose. Right. So our a lot of our work is actually about exactly making aware of the opportunities that are to provide new solutions and innovative tech solutions to societal challenges and generally that benefit society. So what we are trying to do, and especially with this given project that is driving the seminar today, is to be able to provide tools and insights into how you can think about universal design, how you can involve your customer, the consumer, the general user of the future technology and product into the development of it before you actually end up with a product that is ready, but to get them involved in the process. I'm not an expert in universal design, but I'm really happy to have colleagues in-house that can provide these insights. And a use case from us could be the startup that we're working with right now, that is Blinding Vibes. They are developing smart devices that enable blind people to play computer games so that they can become socially included into the gaming society and communities. But the long-term vision for us is that it's not just about developing assistant technologies, but it's actually about developing technologies that are for all, but that exactly include those outside people that Ani mentioned earlier. So if you develop the product for the people that are without the average, you have the average person with as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Diana. And I think going back also to the keynote, I mean, it's a process that you can start from the beginning, making sure that when you're doing the initial research that you're being inclusive and targeting at different target groups. But it also emphasizes and redesign and optimizing the current solutions that you're working on. How can you challenge them? How can you optimize them and tweak them to be more intuitive, even for your main user that might be temporary disabled for several reasons. Yeah, thank you very much. Frederik.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well. So I think it's been like a lot of very interesting things have been said. I think my perspective as an entrepreneur, and maybe my starting point, is that I've been working a lot with people with motor disabilities. So that's where I think I have my special area of actually knowing something. But I think we always have this mantra, which we have built a lot of our like inclusive products about, and that being, if you can build something which works for people with a motor disability or for children, you have more or less developed something which can be used for all, because these two groups are the two most difficult groups to develop anything to. And what I think like inclusive design principle at least can be used for, and now I'm like the entrepreneur, and I'm not using a lot of frameworks, I'm not using a lot of buzzwords, because I think we're just making things like more or less works, and doesn't really matter about what we call them. But that being said, for the principles, I think what it really have given us is that you need to be aware about simplicity, like simplicity all the time, because I think as an entrepreneur or like having building a company and a product, I think we have a tendency to think like overthink everything. We think that we need to include a lot of different features. The product won't fly if you don't put this one into it or that thing into it, and they need to have this kind of integration and blah, 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 blah. And that's really, really scary. And that's also why I think a lot of companies are failing, because they don't understand their actual value proposition. I mean, what is this one specific thing in the product that actually makes sense for the end user? Where do you provide the value? And I guess when you are developing for inclusive design or for people with motor disabilities, you really need to be very certain about that specific thing, because if you make things too complicated, they cannot use it as perception. So I guess inclusive design is not just a thing to do, it's a mindset which benefits in a lot of different ways. And I think like a very concrete example for us is that my company, we're building eye tracking software, and I think we have been out doing a lot of different user research, and I think we have been quite well at actually defining the problem that we had. We know exactly what kind of our application should be able to do. So we start building the eye tracking technology, because we thought, okay, the eye tracking technology needs to work in order for the application to work, because, you know, something needs to work before some other stuff. And we built this eye tracking technology, and there was just like a lot of stuff in between where we just tweaked the tech like so many times, but we were only tweaking it to ourselves, because we're sitting in this room and making sure that, okay, now it works on me, and now it works on my colleague, and now it works on one of the employees. And when we took it out in real life, we just found out that there was like so many different things we haven't thought about in the way that we actually tweak the design of our eye tracking technology. So even though we thought that we have made inclusive design, because we have actually done a lot of user research, we knew exactly what the problem was, the challenges we needed to be solved, we forgot to include them in the development of the technology. I mean, it kind of sounds maybe like like something you just should have done, but what I'm trying to say is that it's a mindset about thinking that you are not representative for the user group that you're actually developing to at all time. So being very close to your customers, your users, like in all different stages of developing a product, very important for succeeding with your business.
Thank you very much. And you're touching a very, very relevant point here, which is to include the different voices of the users. And I think sometimes also being an engineer here at the university, I mean, we are sometimes not very diverse in terms of who is represented here, who is following the study. So getting this connection with reality, whether it's the other business you need to include and consider, but also different types of target groups. Henrik, now we have you here, but how do you think that these engineering students might be more inclusive? How can they reach out to maybe also a type of user segments that are not normally involved in the technology development and new design?
First of all, I very agree with Frederick because I think universal design is a mindset. It's I think we as human beings, we are raised with a lot of notions that we are not conscious about, because starting as a child, that, for example, one of the notions I've met is that people with disabilities always go out together with other people with disabilities. That's the reason why we built some podiums or something that which we go to concerts, that always put all the wheelchair users in some special area, instead of just removing a chair in the stadium and put the wheelchair in. It could be very much easier, much cheaper to do it in that way, but we do it in another way because we have a notion that we like to be together with people like us. White people together with white people, like disabled people together with disabled people. So I think we need to start to have a more diverse point of view and in starting as very early in the education, but just actually before you get into the engineer study or architecture study, because this is the basic, as you said. We are all disabled in some time of our lives, and for example, in our organization, we have all kind of physical disabled people. Muscular dystrophy is actually not one single disease; is 40 different diseases. 75% are walking people. Only 25% is wheelchair users, which means that we have, when we do design, for example at Muson, we need to do design for people who can't walk more than 10 meters. We need to do design for wheelchair users. We need to build toilets in all different kind of way, which means there's big toilets, small toilets. So I think meeting those people is having the spirit that you have a barrier. You have not a disability before you meet a barrier. The stair is a barrier for people, but if there's no stair, you don't have a disability. You can just move around.
And how do you involve them in the process? How do you reach out? How do you make sure you get the relevant perspectives and voices in here? Maybe you, Michael, or Oni has some in terms of the design methodology to include here.
Yeah, well, during the projects I've been a part of, and all the things I've heard from other researchers and designers is that, well, people, it's not always smart to ask people what they want or what they need, because they don't know. And that's why you have to combine different research tools and methods to discover. I don't know if you saw some of the pictures with this OXO, for example. The innovation came from observation, because when the clients, the customers were asked, what was the trouble with this measure mug? Didn't have any trouble. Oh, maybe it was difficult to read the numbers, but that was not the case. The case was totally different. They were bending, they couldn't make the liquid level right. So there were reiteration several times, spending ways, too much time. But the researchers saw that here's an issue and they're not aware of it. So, and also people lie. If you ask them questions, they want to please you. And there's so many different ways. So you have to involve people, different people, presenting different perspectives on the same issue in various ways. And it's also about putting like groups together, discussing things, single interviews, shadowing, observe in action, in context. It's each project, each issue is different. So you have to tailor make and pick the right representatives of users, stakeholders, lead users in your project. You have to design the research so it's appropriate for that project. So there's no single answer to this, but human behavior is unpredictable. And you may be experts in your field, in technology, entrepreneurship, whatnot, but people are experts in their own life. And you have no idea what it's like to be me. Like I have no idea what it's like to be you.
So from a very pragmatic point of view, in terms of actually planning this process and getting started, I don't know, you, Jakob, if you have an example, maybe that's more in the built environment, but how to bring those perspectives in?
Of course, the difference between designing a street and designing a thing for a specific use group is that the streets must be able to be used by everyone. And I can tell you the really boring way that I work mostly for public authorities like municipalities and the state, and our way of doing that in identifying users is that we get in touch with the local handicap and elderly council and ask them what they think, and so that's the sort of that's the way we sort of that's the proper way of command of doing that. And I would like to share and give you a free piece of advice. Is that of course I'm sure if you are working with a project where you want to do something for blind people and develop some things they can use, I think there will be no problem for you in calling the Danish Blind People's Association and getting one of them to come and talk to you, or they will invite you to a meeting. But the challenge here is that the people who work or are members of these organizations and have the time and resources and energy to do that kind of work, they are not representative. They are not average. They will always be the top competencies. They will be the ones that even though they are blind, they can just walk the streets and cross the street. So every time you should always approach users, also have a critical mind about that. And if you talk to a blind person and he says, I can do this and I can do this, I can do this, then deduct 20 or 30 or 50% in order to know what an average blind, if such a person exists, which he or she probably doesn't. I'm not helping very much. I'm just telling you it's really difficult to find the right users, and especially if you now I'm feeling sorry for myself, but if you have to make a street or something that everybody should be able to use, to find the right users is a tough job.
I think it's so interesting that you just said that, but this is also our what we have found is that you have to distinguish by expert users, professional lead users. Sometimes you should just stay away from them. You should have the amateur. It's like business travelers for hotels. They know everything about a hotel. Imagine then a person who has never been to a hotel before. How do you behave, what you do? So it's how you who you pick to represent and what you ask them. It's very important and relevant. And so sometimes experts can be good, but what you mentioned here is that you have to have the amateur, the unexperienced, who are just intuitive about themselves. Those can inform you the most.
Do Henrik?
When we built Musholm, we distinguish very sharp between experts and users, because experts are generalists in some way. They try to talk for a lot of people, while real users talk for themselves. But what I think is a trap is that if you, as engineers or architects, ask users and ask them to be generalists, because it's very important that you're aware that people, as you said, has very individual perspective and personal preferences in a lot of ways.
Just a comment. I didn't talk about experts. I talked about expert lead users. I mean, the professional, when you go to the user organization, oh, we are doing a user research here, we need some users. And then they said their professional lead user, the one who always is participating in this user research. So I just meant professional expert lead user, you know, but experts totally agree, different. But you can distinguish between the type of users.
I see them actually as one of the same, because the organizational representatives, they, as you well know, they have the political correctness. They know all the law, legislations and so on. The other ones just know of something about the daily lives, and it's very, very important to know something what you do when you do daily lives, and also the ages and generations, because young people with disabilities are much more familiar with technologies and digital solutions than, for example, the other ones.
Fantastic. All right, we'll do Frederick, and then we'll give Michael the opportunity also to get a word.
So I think what you guys are saying is really right, but I think also seeing it from a startup perspective, it's very, very difficult to actually do whatever you guys are talking about. And I can also understand that obviously you guys come from some bigger organizations where you probably don't need to move as fast as we do. So I think, I mean, one of the true benefits about developing something for people with, for example, motor disabilities, are they are very organized. I mean, compared to so many other users in B2B or like in all other industries. I mean, it's quite easy. And now I can also see that some of the questions, like how do you get in contact with these people? I mean, just as they also said, I mean, just call a lot of the different organizations. They are more than pleased to help. And that's a really, really good way to very fast get in contact with some of the potential users for your product. And I think that you should actually, if they provide the lead users or the best users or the ones they always choose for these kind of experiments, I think you should just go for them, because they will give you a brief introduction or understanding about what kind of area, what kind of space are you actually operating in. And you could do a lot of initial tests with these people, but obviously you should, as you should with all other user segments. I mean, you should be aware about, are these actually representative for the big one, for like the majority of the market that I'm actually developing to. But I mean, even within user segmentation, we also have a lot of different groups that we are categorizing people in, lead users, the majority of the mass, and all these kind of things. So I think as long as you are aware about what kind of people you are talking to, it's fine. And I think you should not limit yourself or postpone your development process and all these kind of things because you're trying to find the exact right person, because then I think you'll look forever. So, I mean, just go with the flow and be critical about what you talk to and what they say, but obviously also move.
And I think also referring back to, I mean, in the end of the day, it's also a focus on abilities or disabilities. So a kid is not only just representing a child and the potential market of selling to kids, but it's about putting attention to simplicity or durability when you have the little ones testing your solution in all different dimensions. So, all right, Michael, we'll give you also an opportunity to share if you're with us there.
So the approach that we do at Microsoft is twofold. So there is very early in a project, we try to identify who's excluded from a certain experience. And sure, sometimes very early on, we may identify the, let's say, obvious ones, people with real disabilities that are like hard disabilities where you just basically are fully excluded. But then we also look at the full spectrum of even people who are not excluded because of like a physical disability, but because of a temporary or situational limitation. And these are the ones that we have found are very often overseen, like somebody who just doesn't speak a certain language, but has to use a software that is only available in a certain language. There is, unfortunately, not an example, the fire at the Notre Dame in Paris, that was to some extent so excessive because there was one security guard who didn't know about the software, how it's being used, because he was very new to the system. So he was at some point excluded of the system because he didn't get a proper introduction. And this is something that we see more often being a more important aspect for us, that we know a lot on how we can serve people with disabilities. There are certain technologies, there is a lot of features and products nowadays, but we forget that there is a lot of people in between that we don't look at. The other way of how we look at exclusion is that we often have projects where we may not have, because we have a lot of like in-house software, we know that there will not be a person, let's say, who is blind using the system. But we know that the persons that have to use the system will be working in the outdoors where there is different light conditions. So we will reach out to people who are blind on how they would tackle certain situations to get inspiration for how to make the solution for everybody better. So these are two things that we nowadays have seen and where we try to make things better.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I think it's a good point that here we're putting the attentions to either temporary, permanent, or situational disabilities that can challenge the success and the use of your solutions. Even for the Caucasian middle-aged man that might be in a very dark room or in a noisy environment, he will also be challenged in terms of maybe using your potential solution. And I know that in a workshop very shortly, it's some of those things that you already can start working on now. So one thing is, of course, inviting real users on board, but you can already try to work and challenge your solutions with these perspectives, even just having the mindset within your group now. So we're running out of time for this discussion. It's been really, really nice. I hope from the initiative point of view that we will have a further collaboration with all of you, because I think the opportunities and the perspectives you represent from the startup environment, but also in terms of the methodologies and the design prospects that we need to bring in, but also the voices and the experience from working with external partners and different user groups is super valuable for us. So I want to say thank you. I hope you will give them all a big hand, and then we have a bottle of wine for the weekend and a small cup for all of you. Please give them a big hand. Thank you very, very much.